Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, May 2nd, 2013. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Andy Sparks brings us up to speed on his barrel. Andy bought an 8-gallon whiskey barrel a year or so ago, and he's been experimenting with it, brewing with it, and he'll bring us up to speed. If you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. Also, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. Our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're on Google Plus, too. We have a teeny little budding community there. You can find it on Google Plus by searching for Basic Brewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how that works. When you want to shop at Amazon.com, come to us first. Go to basicbrewing.com, click on our banner ad. That will take you to Amazon. And then you shop like you normally do. The only difference is that we get some credit and we get a commission off of whatever you buy. So thank you very much for doing that. It won't cost you any extra, and you're definitely helping us bring you this show. So we greatly appreciate your support. We have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes and our Android app on Amazon.com. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on the Stitcher app, and we're on the Windows Phone directory, too. Check out our brewer's logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front of the book is a calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews. And the calendar is blank, so even though we're almost halfway through the year, you have a full year of calendar pages, no matter when you start your brewing year. And there's a room in the back of the book to log the details of up to 50 batches of brew. And if you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com support, basicbrewing.com/support. And thanks to everybody who's done so already. And last but not least, protect your precious beer with one of our growler bags. The bag is essentially a cylindrical cooler that is just the right size to accommodate a 64-ounce growler or a couple of 22-ounce bombers or 3 12-ounce bottles. Like Steve put a little video on our Facebook page the other day showing how that works. He was going out of town on business and put 3 home brews in his little growler cooler, and so he could relax in style in the hotel room. So anyway, check those out at basicbrewingshop.com. Only a limited number of those are available. A new episode of Basic Brewing Video is out there this week. In that episode, Steve and I sampled our very tasty Mole Stout, and boy, that is a good beer. I mean, that's an experimental recipe that we did in the 1-gallon size, and I'm definitely going to step that up. Steve suggested it be a good holiday beer, and I agree that would go very well around the holidays. Also, in this episode, we start a small batch Belgian. To bottle the beer from that and to use that as a starter for a bigger beer. Time is running out for the Alabama Senate to consider the legislation legalizing home brewing in their state down in Alabama. Brant Warren from Right to Brew says the Senate meets on May 2nd, 7th, 9th, and finally on the 20th, and that's it. So if you are an Alabama home brewer, get on the phone or get on the email to your state senator and let him or her know that you want this to come up for a vote. It has been recommended by the Senate committee, I believe, so all it needs to do is to be voted on by the Senate, approved, and then signed by the governor. So let's get closer to realization. You can follow Brant at ALA Home Brewing on Twitter. That's ALA Home Brewing on Twitter to keep up to date with developments. It ain't over yet, but they do need your help. Time is running out. The American Homebrewers Association says May 7th is National Homebrew Day in the U.S., and Big Brew Day is this Saturday, May 4th. Check your local homebrew club for activities in your area. I plan to be at Andy's shop, the home brewery in Fayetteville, Arkansas. That's Fayetteville, Arkansas, for anybody outside the area. This Saturday, hanging out and watching other guys brew. That should be a fun time. And don't forget that Fayetteville Foam Fest is later that evening. Unfortunately, I've got family stuff to attend to, so I'm going to miss that. I hate it. I mean, I'm going to like being with my family, but, I wish I could do both things at once. I guess I could take my 85-year-old dad to the Foam Fest, but I don't think that would fly. It's going to be great, though. Check out, I believe the website is FayettevilleFoamFest.com. Email. Let's talk about email. I've been getting a lot of email like the one from Greg in Monterey, California, that say listeners are working their way through the archives. I've even gotten a question or two lately from somebody quoting some piece of advice I gave way back in 2006 that I don't follow anymore. I think it was like, get your beer off the primary yeast as quickly as possible. And we don't say that anymore. So I guess there is an advantage to listening to the entire archive all the way through to kind of get some context about how our knowledge has kind of evolved over time. Jerry from Portland, Oregon writes with this. Jerry says, just some clarification on some information on the Homebrewer's Garden episode about Oregon and hops. I grew up in the Yakima Valley and now live in Portland, Oregon. One of the questions someone posed to you and asked was about what kind of hops would grow well on the coast of Oregon. The answer was that any hop that grows in Oregon would work. Well, contrary to popular belief, Jerry says, Oregon and Washington are divided into two distinct areas, and really three, as separated by the Cascade Mountain Range. Think Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, etc. When you were in Seattle, you were in the general cooler, wetter side. The coast of Washington and Oregon, not the coast in Seattle or of Puget Sound, is a whole different animal altogether. Hops are grown in the eastern side of Washington and Oregon for the most part, and I'm not sure of any commercial hop growers on the west side of either state. The coasts see highs in the 50s and 60s during the heat of summer or the heart of summer, maybe a 70-degree day here or there. Oh, man. And not always much sun either, plenty of fog even in summer. So I think the person who posed the question about growing hops on the coast of Oregon was asking about that climate, not the hop-growing regions of Yakima or the Willamette Valley. They were curious about growing hops in the lower light, cooler climate of the northern Pacific coast and not the 90 to 100 degree Fahrenheit dry desert, arid summer weather in Yakima or eastern Oregon. Appreciate the clarification, Jerry. That shows you how geographically challenged I am about the northwest part of the country. Here's another one from that area of the country. Michael writes, out here in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, we grow a lot of hops, but not too much barley or wheat. The Oregon State University Extension Office is working with local farmers out in the eastern part of the state, planting some experimental barley strains designed for our climate. Portland sits between the Coast Range and the Cascades, while on the east side of the Cascades it's high, dry, and loamy, which is good soil for growing wheat and barley. The biggest concerns, as far as I know, are with pests and puccioniales, a form of grain rust. Other than that, hopefully soon we will be able to get locally produced barley as well as hops. Agrarian Brewing down by Eugene is doing the estate brewing thing like Sierra Nevada is producing Belgian-style farmhouse ales. Also, I went on a beer diet. This is fun. Michael says, I went on a beer diet, which I have substituted beer for my snacks of choice, and have lost 57 pounds since I last saw you at the OBC meeting. Well, cool. That is awesome. Congratulations on the weight loss, and appreciate the information. My doctor told me to drop a few pounds since the beginning of the year, and unfortunately my snack of choice is beer. So it is challenging to drop some pounds. So I congratulate Michael on the success there. Okay, let's talk to anytime you can incorporate good beer in with your weight loss program and do it successfully. I think it's a big deal. Okay, let's talk to Andy Sparks about his barrel. Andy Sparks, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Well, it's always great to be here, James.
Here we are. We're sitting. It's a beautiful day. We're out here in your happy place on your deck, and we're drinking some Ranger IPA from New Belgium in a can because it's sunny out here, and we don't want our beer to get skunked.
That's right. It's a beautiful day, about 78 degrees. The wind's blowing. The birds are chirping. Dogs out here, so we'll see how it goes.
You know, every now and then I get an email saying, whatever happened with Andy's barrel? And, last year, it's been a little over a year ago, we introduced the fact that you got a new toy, and we talked about your plans in prepping it and what you were going to brew in it, and we just haven't gotten together to talk about it since then, and you've done 2 beers in it since then. So let's just, as a refresher, let's go back, take us back to when you first got your new toy.
Okay, so about a year ago, I saw an ad from the AHA on their website about ordering a freshly dumped bourbon barrel from Woodinville Whiskey Company. So I went ahead and got one of those. They're 8 gallons. The plan was to do a fairly large beer in it the first time, a fairly strong beer that would extract a lot of its, oaky and bourbony character. Eventually, my plan is to use the barrel for funky beers. But the first couple beers I wanted to do were beers that would accentuate, or the beers would be accentuated with the flavor of the bourbon and the oak in the barrel. So what we decided to do was do an Imperial Stout as the first batch, a nice big beer to try to extract as much of that as possible of the character of the barrel. So what we did is we did a big oatmeal stout, put that in there. We can talk a little bit about the recipe and all that. Since then, I've also put a Scotch Wee Heavy. The founder of my local homebrew club, who has since passed away several years ago, Dr. John, he created a Wee Heavy that he won a silver medal for. So the club that I'm in has been really eager to do a full-size barrel batch of Dr. John's Wee Heavy. But that's a lot of beer and that's a lot of work, and so I suggested that they borrow my barrel and just do a small batch and see if everybody really wants a whole bunch of bottles of that, after we run it through there. Maybe it's more beer than everybody really wanted. So that's what we're doing. We've got a little batch going in it, and we're going to get that ready probably for the next club meeting.
So let's go back to the first beer and do some details on that, because you wanted to do oats in there. We were debating the last time we talked about it on the show on how to prepare the oats. We had a theory, and did that theory work out?
Well, I think so. I mean, the beer seems to have turned out pretty well. What we wanted to do is I'd been making oatmeal using steel cut oats in a slow cooker overnight. Put it in the cooker in the morning, it's ready to go. It's really gooey, really creamy. And I thought, wow, this is really kind of the gelatinization process that we put cereal grains through, kind of like you would get from doing a cereal mash or something like that when you use adjuncts. And I thought, well, maybe I should just slow cook my oats overnight, and then I would be able to just mix them into the mash and use them kind of just as a regular, like you would maybe wheat or barley. So what I did, the thing is, we were going to make a big beer. I mean, and a lot of beer, right? Because the wooden barrel holds 8 gallons. Our plan was to finish with was to make basically, an extra third above that. So what we did is we tried to make about 12 gallons, so that we'd end up with 8 in the barrel with 4 left over as a blend to blend with if we wanted to later. We didn't end up getting quite as much beer out of the batch as we thought, so we didn't end up with quite that much. We ended up with a solid 8 gallons into the barrel, and then just a couple extra gallons left over. But with that much ingredients, the recipe called for 26 pounds of two-row for the base malt in this beer. We used a couple pounds of amber malt, which is a traditional grain that's used in stouts and porters. Some roasted barley, as you would expect in a stout. Little debittered black malt. But then we used 3 pounds of steel-cut oats. So I got from Bob's Red Mill. You get them at your grocery store. It's the same stuff you'd use, for cereal. But with 3 pounds of that, that wouldn't fit in my slow cooker. So what I ended up doing is creating a giant double boiler with my hot liquor tank that has an electric heating element in it, so I could basically keep the water in the hot liquor tank at a specific temperature all night. And then I just put the steel-cut oats along with the water that you use to make them, and I put that down in there, kind of like I said, as a double boiler, and let it just sit overnight. And by the morning, it was gooey and kind of creamy, and actually tasted pretty yummy. So from there, this still was an awful lot of grain, and it was more grain than my mash tun could hold. I use a converted keg, some people call them kegels, but I use one of those as my mash tun. And I also have a 10-gallon round cylindrical cooler mash tun as well. And so what we did is we ended up splitting the mash between the two vessels. We put most of the base malt, the dark specialty malts, in the regular mash tun, in the kegel mash tun. And then what we did with the steel cut oats is we added some two-row with them and added them to the cylindrical cooler. We lined that with a brew in the bag bag, so that we could make sure that we wouldn't get a stuck sparge. I mean, we're using a huge proportion of very sticky, gooey grain. And the main reason for mixing in the additional two-row, one, enzymatic power, but two, also to add some husk material.
And we also, I think we did 10 pounds of two-row in there with the 3 pounds of oats.
Right.
And I think that we put a pound of rice hulls in there as well.
Let me see if it's on the list. Yeah, it is on the list. So, yeah, we... Yeah, it's been a little while since we've made this beer, so some of the bits are a little foggy.
Well, I have the advantage of looking at the video that we shot, the raw footage, and I saw that I had forgotten about the rice hulls, but we did put those in there.
So yeah, I mean, we ended up with basically two kind of beers that we blended back together into the brew kettle. The runoff from the oats was murky and very cloudy. To the point that you would worry that it wasn't actually converted, but we did test that, and it was converted. Tasted kind of interesting too, kind of more of an oaty kind of character than you're used to in a beer mash. Then we pulled the rest of the stuff off out of the normal mash tun, and then boiled it all together. And we ended up boiling it for about an hour and a half, I think. Give it a nice long boil. The hopping on it was a couple ounces of Warrior at the start for 60 minutes, and then a couple ounces of Fuggles at the end. So we also added a Whirlflock tab at the end and fermented with USO5. So,
and then
we used the Fermentus Saf Ale USO5.
Yeah, right. So we did you say the gravities, the original gravity?
Yeah, I think it was, let's see, 10, 11, I think, because it was right about there. So, yeah. Pretty big, sticky, sweet wort going in. It made a delicious hot scotchy. But then, it finished out, let's see, where did we finish out at? I'm looking for that. Oh, right, about 10:25. So the beer turned out, pretty nice. It's a little sweet, which is what we wanted. We put it in the barrel. We only left it in the barrel for a couple weeks. We were a little nervous about leaving it in the barrel too long, especially since it was a fresh barrel. One of the things we did to keep the barrel fresh, when I got it, it was pretty much dry inside. It still looked moist, but it didn't have any fluid running around in the side. So we dumped a bottle of Maker's Mark in there, and I put the bung in, rolled it around, and I left that in there until we were ready to use it, and then I drained out what was left of the Maker's Mark, and there was only about a cup and a half. So it absorbed quite a bit of that. And that's kind of apparent in the finished product. We definitely get a nice bourbon note in it. It's not overpowering, but it's definitely there.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, it stayed in the barrel for 2 weeks, and then came out delicious.
Yeah.
We talked about blending it, but we, after tasting the final product, we decided not to.
Yeah, if we had left it in there for a month, and I know a lot of people when they talk barrels, talk about long exposure time in the barrels, 6 months, a year, more. That's probably good in certain circumstances, and the size of the barrel is going to matter there, right? So this is a very small barrel. Surface to area ratio is going to be much higher. So you probably want to be careful about, over contact. Since we only left it in 2 weeks, I think we basically pulled it at just about the right time, flavor-wise, to get a good product.
So what do you think the oats bring to the beer?
They add kind of a creamy richness to the beer. I don't get a lot of oaty flavor, but I do get that kind of slickness in the mouthfeel from the oats.
Yeah, it's a tasty beer.
Should be even better when we get it all carbonated.
And the second round. Now, how did you you had the barrel in the fridge too, I guess we should say.
Yeah, well, I have the advantage of having a big refrigerator to do my fermentation in, and so we basically left it in there. It ran at 68, so it wasn't like I was trying to keep it cold. I was just trying to keep it at a stable temperature. So that's what we did. And then when we ended up emptying it, I just basically left it in the refrigerator after we emptied it, along with the carboys that had the beer in it. And that way they were all basically set in there. And that way the barrel didn't dry out, didn't get, a chance to get funky, outside. But when I went to prep it for the second use, I rinsed it with basically boiling water. Filled it with boiling water till it ran out the top, bunged it, rolled it around, drained it, and I did that a couple times before refilling it with the next batch of beer.
Did you get a lot of residue out of there?
Yeah, there was not a lot of like what you would expect from like a porter, like brown or black, or not porter, the stout. We made a stout. I didn't get a lot of that. It didn't look like I was draining something that had a stout in it. What I was getting was little teeny bits of the charred barrel. So little flakes of barrel were coming out. But not a lot, just a handful.
So talk about this second beer. Another session ale.
Yeah, right. Not really a session beer. So this beer, this is a wee heavy that Dr. John Griffiths won a silver medal with. And we've been talking about making it for a long time. And this is an absolutely huge beer. When we made it, to make enough to fill the 8 gallons, because what we wanted to do was fill that barrel, we were going to start with 10 gallons in the brew kettle. But to hit the number that we were trying to hit, which was an 1134, we ended up using 44 pounds of Golden Promise, 4 pounds of Carafoam, 1.3 pounds of roasted barley, and about 2.5 pounds of Weyermann smoked malt. Which is odd. The reason we went with that is because it was Dr. John's recipe, and that's what he used. Everything I read, it is not traditional to put smoked malt in your Scottish ales. That should come from the yeast. That character is derived from the yeast, and not from using peat smoked malt, and especially not from using German smoked malt. But that's what he used, and maybe when he made this was 20 years ago, right? So maybe that's just what was available, and but what we did is, obviously if the last batch of beer wouldn't fit in my mash tun, this wasn't going to fit in my mash tun either. And this was not eligible for a brew in the bag because of this. You couldn't lift up that much wet grain. in a bag. So what we did is I have a 55-gallon steel drum, and I had put a valve on the bottom of that. And what I did is I hooked up the classic steel pipe screen mesh, like stainless steel mesh. Yeah,
some people use a braided hose.
It's exactly the same thing. Yeah, I got a fairly large one. I had to go back to where they hook up hot water heaters and stuff, and not to the regular plumbing supply area. And they look like they're about an inch and a half across. So I set up a loop of that in the bottom of this steel drum, and then we used that steel drum as a giant mash tun, and it was full to about halfway. And we pulled the beer off of there, and was able to pretty closely hit our number. And then we pulled a second beer, a baby beer, off of that grain, and hit a 1070. So the baby beer was a 1070. We probably could have pulled a third beer off of it.
Holy smokes! What was the volume of it? Was the volume the same on the baby beer as the big beer?
The baby beer was it was a 5, 6. I guess he put 6 gallons, 6.5 into his brew kettle. But the big beer was 8 gallons total.
So you could have probably gotten a third beer out of that as well.
Exactly.
A little session beer.
So that beer, I'll be honest, we used Edinburgh yeast.
Did you talk about hops?
I didn't talk about hops, and there's almost so little hops in there, it's not even worth bringing up. No, I will bring up. So, 1.5 ounces of Fuggles.
Wow.
Wait, no, 2.5 ounces of Fuggles. And we boiled those for 45 minutes, and then we also boiled an ounce, 1.25 ounces of EKGs for the same amount of time. So basically there was 3.75 ounces of fairly low English alpha hops. And that would be appropriate for most of those styles, right? You don't want a lot of hop bitterness, hop flavor and aroma at the end. Mm-hmm. Just enough to kind of give it a little balance.
So that went into the barrel for how long?
Well, it's still in the barrel.
Oh, that's right.
It's been in the barrel about a month, and I have checked it a couple times. And it doesn't have an intense oakiness like ours did, and I think the rinsing of it helped. It also, I think we got a lot of the oak character in our batch of beer, but I think it's going to lend a little nice flavor to the beer.
Yeah, it's not nearly as the oak character is not as much, and then the booziness is not there either. Because of course you didn't you rinsed it with hot water instead of rinsing it with bourbon.
Yeah.
So it's not carbonated at this point. So what's your strategy on that? I mean,
it's been nice and safe. That's the thing, is when we moved it to the carboys after the barrel and tasted great. Just parked that carboy in the fridge and let it settle, with the intention of maybe bottling it, getting back to that. But you think about bottling it, this beer is sat for a long time,
And you're talking about our beer, the oak,
right.
The stout,
right? So it's got a lot of alcohol in it. The odds of us being able to carbonate this in the bottle are probably slim. So I think we're going to just go ahead and keg it. It makes sense. We'll get the satisfaction a little quicker, and we could always, put some in bottles if we need to.
Yeah.
After we carbonate it. This is not a beer that needs to be highly carbonated. It's once we get it established, we'll be able to put this in bottles from the keg, and I think it'll last just fine. I don't think we'll have any issues with that.
And what about the second one? I mean, it's in the barrel now. Do you just rack that from the barrel into kegs, or?
Yeah, I think because of what I saw coming out of the bottom of the barrel, the little bits of wood, what I'll probably do is rack it to a carboy for a couple weeks, and just let anything else settle out, and that way I can kind of see what I'm doing as I decant it into the bottling bucket. But but that's my plan. I'll move it to a carboy, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and start putting bugs in that barrel next.
Yeah, I guess with the Wee Heavy, you're probably going to have to bottle that because it was a group effort, and part of the purpose is to use this as a test batch for a larger batch, and that was to be bottled. So I guess that's the next phase of the experiment to test how it would do on a larger size.
Right. Although I am a little worried about getting it carbonated. Mm-hmm. We've had some issues with the yeast. The beer it didn't attenuate as well as maybe I would have liked. It is a little sweet. With that being said, it makes me a little nervous as I go to the bottling stage, right? So it's a little under attenuated, which means the yeast in it is not going to bother to eat any corn sugar if I throw it in there. So the way to get it started again probably would be to either introduce nice fresh new yeast with the priming sugar, but then I'm running the risk that it could start to work on some of the sugars from the original batch because it was a little under attenuated. Again, I'm not so sure. I'm not going to maybe suggest that we go ahead and keg this and then bottle from the keg, just because that way we can get a nice consistent carbonation level and ensure that it comes out right. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we try to do it and just do natural carbonation, it just would be really disappointing if these come out flat and even sweeter because now it has some priming sugar in it.
I guess in theory you could add some yeast with a higher alcohol tolerance, like champagne yeast or something like that. But again, like you were saying, it's kind of an unknown variable, knowing how much that champagne yeast is going to eat of those residual sugars, and so you might wind up with something that's overcarbonated.
Right. That is a chance you would take, and that's why I'm pretty much not leaning to trying to introduce new yeast here at the end. You could always throw some Brett in
there. Which brings us to our next stage, the next stage in the life of the barrel. So you think it's time to move on to the bugs now?
Oh, absolutely. That was the whole reason for getting it. I want to get it established with some good critters, so I can start to make some fun, funky beers. I've made a few funky beers in the past. They were basically just done in carboys. They turned out nice, but I really like the idea of being able to get something started and then just keep reusing this barrel to produce kind of my home strain of funk.
So what are you going to introduce into there?
Well, it depends what Michael Tonsmeyer sends me. I have friends in low places, and I'm hoping that I can hook up with a few of them. I have some beers here that would probably be good for introducing. In some of our episodes where we've talked to Michael, part of one of the things he does is, he'll add the dregs of a Jolly Pumpkin beer, or so he does have contacts and does get very specific bugs from some of his vendors and the people he deals with. But I know he also does some kind of creative stuff with just when he finds a beer that he finds charming or finds interesting, he'll use some of the dregs from those. And that's kind of part of what I plan to do as well. When we find a beer that we think is interesting, go ahead and pour that stuff in there. Let's see how it goes.
And for those of you who don't follow the Mad Fermentationist on Twitter, he announced a couple weeks ago that his sour book has been picked up by Brewers Publications, which is good news, and that it'll get wide distribution. The bad news is that their publication schedule means that we won't see that book until, I think he said 2015. So
wow.
We got plenty of time to pick his brain between now and then, and get some more good advice from him. So I think you have a good friend there to get some advice on your next stage of the barrel.
Yeah, the last time we talked on the show, we discussed a little bit about my use of the barrel and how it would go from here. So think that's where we're going to go.
So what's your piece of advice to somebody who wants to do the same thing? I mean, if there's somebody out there who sees a small barrel online and wants to get into it, I mean, what do you think were the points that did you learn anything new, or if you had known something at the beginning, would you change anything? What are your pieces of advice?
Oh, I don't know. I would definitely encourage you to go for it, right? I mean, what's it going to hurt? You're going to have a great little tool in your arsenal of beer flavors, your ability to paint creative pictures with flavors. Really, I would say, the main thing is find a place to put it. It's bigger than you're going to think, right? So, and it's not going to really fit on your kitchen counter. So it's going to need a spot where you can keep it. It does drip a little bit at first, so it's a little messy. I had a spot out in the garage, so it wasn't too bad in the beer cooler. So those sort of things. We did do the nail trick where we drilled a hole through the end of it so that we could pull samples. I found that for this small barrel, the nail trick doesn't work really that great. You'll pull the nail and the beer will barely come out and just kind of drool down the side of the barrel and not really.
And it's not very becoming to see you lick the side of the barrel there.
Right. So I know it's a technique that most of the big brewers use on their larger size barrels. I have a feeling with the amount of volume inside a larger barrel, it creates enough kind of pressure to push the beer through the little hole. I was able to get it flowing by re-drilling the hole, but then, it comes spraying out on your drill. So, I wouldn't worry too much about that. For us, it's not that hard to pull the bung and just get a beer thief or a wine thief and just take a quick sample and then put the bung back in. It's not that big a deal.
Well, cool. It's been fun seeing this little project evolve and to get a bunch of tasty beers. Now the wind is kicking up, so it may be time to... My can is awfully light, Andy.
I know how to fix that.
And Avery has been a good girl playing with her ball here on the deck. And boy, this is a perfect time of year. I wish it could just stay like this all year round. It's probably we're enjoying some weather that's enjoyed by certain areas of California all year round, right?
Yeah, I remember our trip to San Diego for the National Home Brewers Conference, and it was basically just like this, beautiful temperatures, just a light breeze, and wonderful.
All right. Well, thanks, Andy. we will then when you get some bugs in there, we'll come back and talk to you some more about that, and we'll see, we're going to go to somewhere in June. I can't remember. Where were we?
Philadelphia?
Oh, okay. That sounds like a good place to go. We can go there.
What's going on there in June?
I don't know. We'll find something to do.
Yeah. I hope to see lots of folks out there.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Andy.
Thank you, James.
Thanks again to Andy. His homebrew shop is The Home Brewery in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And you can find it online at thehomebrewery.com. That's thehomebrewery.com. That's Steve and my local homebrew shop where we get our ingredients and gear and stuff. And by the way, in the back room of that shop is where this podcast was born. So there you go. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Our new Basic Brewing growler bags are available on our shop. Protect your precious homebrew and craft beers. You take it from place to place as the weather warms up here in the Northern Hemisphere this season. Check out our new support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Greatly appreciate everybody there. You can check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. All on our site. We've got combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And we've got shirts in the store, too. Our brewers' logbooks are also there. Keep track of 50 batches of beer. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We greatly appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are iPhone 4 CDMA Verizon/Sprint Premium Replacement Screen and Repair Kit, white. Whew. I wish you better luck with replacing that iPhone screen than I had on replacing the screen on my son's iPod Touch. That didn't go well. And Fusion Brands Silicone Poach Pods, set of 2, green. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. You can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.